But in the last couple of minutes, I just wanted to shift it back to these vaccines, particularly the vaccine companies in the United States. And you wrote a piece in Jacobin basically lamenting this wide-ranging celebration of Big Pharma, which, as you noted in the piece, just was it last year or the year before, was ranked amongst like one of the worst in public opinion industries, and now has skyrocketed up. Could you sort of walk us through why that's a problem and how they've been able to launder their image?
I just think it's very emblematic. Like I thought of this, I guess a week or so ago because of something my girlfriend said to me actually, and it occurred to me for the first time, like just how emblematic it is of I don't know, the trajectory from I don't know, kind of language you would hear in maybe April of 2020, where this was going to be this like wartime style effort, unprecedented cooperation,
Mm-hmm.
vaccines for all, people's vaccine. We went from that really without anybody noticing, I think, until recently, thanks to all the activism around the patent issue. Um, you know, Really without even noticing, we kind of we arrived at a point where the market had completely devoured the global vaccine response. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't need to we've already talked about all the ways that that's happened, but I think like something that's very emblematic of that that when we think of vaccines now, we think of them in relation to these brands, these specific
Mm-hmm.
brands. And in the piece, like I talk about, what's happened with Kleenex, which, Kleenex, I ended up, I mean, it's just like one of those funny things about like having to write a piece every day is you end up learning a lot of random facts. And with this piece, that was certainly the case. Like I learned that, Kleenex was registered not as a facial tissue, but as something else in 1924. But it was so successful that it kind of took off, and eventually just the Kleenex brand. Like when you say Kleenex now, you don't think of a trademark.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like saying iPhone or something, really, or I don't know. There might be a better example, but
Sharpie's
um,
another one like that too, right?
right,
Podcast.
right. You like Kleenex just like subsumed the actual product, even though I couldn't find recent numbers, but Kleenex doesn't have a majority market share, just a very generous one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that probably doesn't matter when we're talking about Kleenex, right? It's like I don't really care. I'm not like socializing Kleenex. It's not like high up on my list of like political priorities, but it absolutely does matter if we're talking about like life-saving vaccines that are the only protection against a deadly virus. I think the fact that like these companies have just like pulled off this PR coup is like it's very emblematic of this kind of wider global failure.
And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but um, one thing that think gets lost with some folks who might not consider themselves to be socialists when they hear us complaining about big pharma and Pfizer and these companies. Well, they're sitting here and saying like, well, of course people are celebrating them because we're living in a pandemic and they gave us a vaccine. But what we're saying is, one, no, they really didn't. We're trying to divorce that. And two, we absolutely celebrate the potential of like of scientists and researchers and people who are developing this. We support that process very much so, actually to such an extent that what we're saying here is to protect the brand, right? You actually have to prevent there to be global collaboration on on virus research, on vaccine research, and then you have to have control over the distribution of the vaccine system too, instead of making it accessible at all. We're not saying we don't celebrate somebody who was spending days and days on days trying to figure out how to deal with the virus. We're saying there's this big monster that's sitting on top of that process that's making it less efficient, and is now reaping incredible profit at the expense of all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why, in that statement that Matt, you read off the top from the Biden administration, they're very clear that they're like, look, we support property,
Mm-hmm.
rights. This is just like an emergency thing. You can see, there's an immediate panic on the markets yesterday after this announcement. These shares absolutely plummeted. And I think that's because there's a recognition now. And I mean, this would have actually surprised me 3 weeks ago. And it's another one of those like being pleasantly surprised type of things. It would have surprised me that the reputation of these companies, or at least the kind of status quo they were protecting, could potentially like fall in people's estimation so quickly. And I think they now realize that there actually is a tremendous risk here, because I saw somebody tweet earlier today. I saw because Naomi Klein retweeted it. Somebody was saying like, let's do the same thing with sharing the patents around green technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can think of so many other cases where there's just an immediate, intuitive, and like pretty much irrefutable case for cooperating, for sharing scientific knowledge. And the profiteers, the monopolists of private industry, and their political apologists, I think, really recognize the threat that something like this poses to their way of doing business and to their entire model. Because what COVID has done is expose their entire model as a sham, as monopoly, as profiteering, and as inefficient if the criteria that's centered is, there's a pandemic, and so our goal should be to eradicate the pandemic as quickly as possible. The market doesn't have a solution to that. In fact, it's an albatross around the neck of cooperation in the interest of ending the virus as soon as possible.
And just one final point, even on the branding note, on the knowledge transfer thing, there's nothing to say that Pfizer couldn't teach something to AstraZeneca or Moderna, right? Like we had all this knowledge. Maybe these vaccines could be even better. But Luke Savage, you can find him at Luke W Savage on Twitter. I think you want to plug tonight, Luke?
Oh, I guess I might as well plug my own podcast, Michael and Us. It's like a current events podcast, but also like a film and TV podcast. So a bit of everything. People who like this podcast will probably like it. So check it out.